All right, greetings and welcome everybody. We are really happy that you have decided to join us this afternoon for our webinar, Hague Parent and Staff Training, What Works and What Does IAAME Want? I am Cecily Timmons. I'm the Development Director at Creating a Family, and I work with Partnership Development, Fundraising, and Community Outreach. I want to go ahead and tell you we have a lot of information for you today. We have a lot to cover and not much time in our time slots. So I'm going to be very brief, but I do want to give you the heads up that we might run a little bit over the hour. So we really hope that you will stay until the end, especially for the few minutes for questions that we will have at the end, but we understand if you have other places to be. So first, I'm going to go over a few Zoom specific items. We, at this point, I think with this COVID crisis, we're all very much acquainted with Zoom, but if that is not the case for you, I just want to point out a few functions. We will mute you on our end, so you don't have to worry about that, us hearing anything that's going on in your homes or your offices or wherever you are. But if you do want to stop your video, please feel free to do that. It's on the bottom black bar. There's the little video camera, and you can just click that and it will stop your video if you don't want to be seen. Otherwise, the chat function is going to be particularly useful for us here. While we have you muted, we do hope that any questions or comments that you have during the presentation, that you will feel free to put those in that chat box. If you just click on the chat, it pops right up and you can send messages that way. Okay, also, we're going to reference some extra resources and handouts during the presentation today. And so look for those in your email inbox by the end of this week. We're going to reach back out to you either tomorrow or Friday with those resources. So before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to just give you a glimpse of who we are at Creating a Family. So if we could pop to the next slide. So Creating a Family is the National Adoption and Foster Care Education and Support Nonprofit. We are a small but mighty nonprofit organization, as you can see here. And there are lots of Dawns. So there really aren't that many Dawns. But I want to call your attention to two individuals in particular. We have Jamie Gilmore, who is our assistant director here today with us as well. And while she's not speaking, I don't believe, until the end, she is helping, and she's really been a big driving behind the scenes force in helping to get this webinar out to you today. And if you have any questions, you can actually chat to her directly in the box if you would prefer to do it that way. Secondly, I would like to introduce you to Cressa Megown, who's our online education director. And if you've taken any of our online courses in the past, or you plan to in the future, you're interested in it, Cressa will be your resource there, and she's wonderful to work with as well. All right, so I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. Dawn Davenport is Creating a Family's Executive Director. She is also the host of the weekly Creating a Family radio show and podcast, which we are really excited to say has aired for almost 13 years. She is an attorney. Dawn is a published author. She's an adoption trainer, and she's a curriculum developer. And I know Dawn is really thrilled to share what she has learned with you today. So take it away, Dawn.
Might help if I unmute myself first. I took your advice and muted myself. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We are really very happy to have you here. I'm muted. I believe I'm unmuted. There we go. As Cecily was mentioning, Creating a Family is the national adoption and foster care education and support nonprofit. And our mission is to strengthen and inspire adoptive, foster, and kinship parents and the professionals who support them. and you guys are part of the professionals who we support. So we are so glad to have you with us today. We're going to be talking about the Hague regulations specific to parent education and staff education. And that would include 22 CFR 96.48, that's parent education, and 22 CFR 96.36, that is what we call staff training. And I've also included 8 CFR 204, 311, and that is just the requirements for what has to be in a home study, and I will be referencing them at one point soon. So I think it helps to begin by saying, why do we train? I mean, and to begin with, why do we care about parents being trained and professionals being trained? And the first and foremost reason is in the best interest of kids. It's in the best interest of kiddos to have parents who are trained and prepared and who have realistic expectations for them for what parenting children adopted from abroad will be like. The next reason is it's the law. That's obvious, right? Also, if things go wrong and you were to have a dissolution, your parent training and what you did to prepare these parents will be scrutinized. And that leads right into the last reason, which is one of the reasons we train is for liability protection. We know that it may be helpful if you have problems to be able to show that you did not only just the minimum, but above and beyond what was necessary in order to prepare your parents for this child. I should mention that we cannot guarantee that what we're saying here today is going to be accepted by IAAME, and we can't provide legal advice. However, what we can do is share general experience based on many conversations we've had with agencies that are using our packages and our courses, as well as we interviewed 6 or 7 agencies who have gone through IAAME accreditation or have gone through site visits and have received their report. And we have discussed with 3 consultants who were very generous with their time, and they were Diana Bonney, Nicole Skellinger, and Etta Davis. I can't recommend them enough. As I said, they were very generous with their time, and they have a wealth of information. So do please consider them as you go forward. And we reviewed all the IAAME presentations to get a feel for what they were saying as well. Based on that, I want to begin by just some general discussions of differences that we heard about between COA and IAAME. Some may surprise you. One is that COA is considered more clinical and more social work focused, and that's from the agencies who have been accredited by both. IAAME, we hear, is more about checking boxes, and as one agency said, they're more like auditors. Another one commented that IAAME is quite literal in their interpretation, and they're looking for an exact match with the regulatory language. They are thorough, and they don't give you much benefit of the doubt, even on small matters. And they are, however, they are extremely thorough. That was the other thing that we had heard. IAAME, I should mention, is very clear, however, that even though they are looking for matches to regulatory language, or that's the perception of agencies, they don't want you to just restate as part of your policy what the regulations state. They are more interested in the who, what, when, and there, and they want you to go that far. You must include that type of detail. One thing that we heard almost universally was agencies that were surprised by the discrepancy between their exit interview and then what they heard in their report. They felt like that they heard one thing and they were caught by surprise when they got their exit report. It seemed to be the accepted belief that you need to go in expecting that you're going to get some corrective actions and just come away with the attitude that they can be fixed and you're going to fix them. I'm going to give you some quotes directly from the agencies we interviewed. One was, the people we worked with at IAAME were excellent. They were very willing to understand new ways to comply with the law. They were very detailed focused, but even if it wasn't quite what they were thinking, they were willing to learn from us. They were very professional. One agency reported that they were questioned that something came up in their review and their site visit. It was not specific to training, and IAAME let them correct it right then and there. But when I asked other agencies, they said they had not had that experience. A couple of agencies said that the IAAME staff had been responsive and available, and they had a good working relationship. And lastly, this is a quote: "IAAME is not the boogeyman. It's a big change, and it will take some getting used to, but they aren't the boogeyman." So, how much does IAAME focus on parent and staff training? For the most part, what we heard was that they focus. They absolutely do. I'm going to give you some quotes. We ask every agency that. Absolutely everything, it is a quote, absolutely everything in 96.48 and 96.38 is being questioned. They really scrutinize parent and staff education, including supplemental resources like articles and websites. They seemed hyper-focused on parent training. They spent a significant amount of time reviewing every piece of our parent training curriculum. We didn't mind because anytime that a child disrupts as a result of a difficult or challenging behaviors, staff always wonder if they could have done a better job preparing the family. But we also heard another quote was they didn't focus too much other than on documentation. Documentation was big. So you can see that it's a bit of a mixed bag, although apparently there is significant focus in general, is what we are hearing. Keep in mind that both your families and your staff will be interviewed by IAAME, and you will not know who they're going to be interviewing. So I think that's important. And I thought one of the agencies I interviewed made a really good point. They said that after their site visit, they realized that a lot of times in their training that their families might not know that there is a regulatory requirement that they be trained. And they worried that the families who were being interviewed might not, when they were saying, well, were you trained according to this regulation? They wouldn't know. So they were going to make a point of course, telling their families that they're being trained so that they could be the best parents possible for this child, obviously. But in addition to that it is a regulatory requirement. All right. We're going to jump in now. We're going to start with 96.48A and B. And I am going to mute myself and cough. This is not anything other than that probably, unfortunately, may not be the first time. It's yellow season here, pollen everywhere. All right, so we're going to be talking about parent education. Is going to be 96.48A. This is what we generally call our general training. They're the general Hague training requirements, at least 10 hours independent of the home study. This is B. B is the section that gets into the details of saying what they want your families to be trained on. It's the one that's going to go into things about that can affect the child in country, reasons why the child might be placed, effects of malnutrition, toxins, impact of a child leaving, everything they know, and things like that. That's the B sections. We're going to divide out into B, and we're going to be talking about B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. We're leaving out 6 and 8 because 6 and 8 we're going to treat separately because of how you're going to be able to utilize, how you will be able to utilize trainings for that. One thing to note is that 96.48B 1, 2, and 4 are country specific. And what that means, there's language in there, something along, I'll give you the example from B1. B1, you have to provide training on inter-country adoption process, the general characteristics and needs of children awaiting adoption, and the in-country conditions that affect children in the foreign country from which the prospective adoptive parents plan to adopt. And similar language you will find in B2 and 4. So it is country specific. However, what we are hearing is as long as the training it includes regional patterns, that's fine, that's acceptable. However, one thing you may want to think about is making sure that you train families for every country that they may be considering. For an example, with B1, you want to make sure you cover every country that the family might be considering. And it's easier to do that up front than afterwards once they select Bulgaria, then going, oh, did we make certain we train on that? So you want that training to be fairly general so that you've covered it at the beginning. All right. The one of the questions we have, and this is the audience participation. We're going to keep you on your toes here, and this is going to be our first poll. We want to know how many hours you require. How many hours of training does your agency require for families to take? Keeping in mind, yeah. So if you will fill that out. And while we're doing that, what we heard from the agencies we interviewed was anywhere from 12, oopsie, to anywhere from 12 to 35. I'm going to read out the results when we get them in. I will be reading out the percentages. I'm going to give you just a second. Okay, it looks like it has stopped now. 55% require 10 to 12 hours. 23% require 13 to 20 hours. 20% require between 21 and 30 hours, and 2%, which was one agency, required over 35 hours. All right. You have to clear that. All right. So what are some of the ways that agencies are, well, what are some of the ways that agencies are meeting this requirement? One, obviously, we will all know about the online Hague packages. There are a number of them. Creating a Family has one. Adoption Learning Partners, Heart of the Matters, and NCFA all have Hague, and all of them, I believe, are 10 hours, so you get the minimum there through that. Another way is through webinars or in agency holding their own meetings, educational informational meetings as well. The key is to make certain that you have the following information in your file for documentation of attendance. So you want to have the date, you want to have who attended, and for each file you want to include that. You want to have the person, whether it was in person or online, and you want to have the content of what was presented, and you want to have that for each family. So once it's pulled, once their record is pulled, it's there, and you don't have to look it up. That's the documentation. Another way agencies are meeting the requirements for 96.48A and B is through books. There are so many, you couldn't begin to list them all. I just list a couple of my favorites, but there, as we well know, there are many more. Another way is through articles. And this is taking you to the Creating a Family site, creatingafamily.org. We have a lot of free articles that you are welcome to use and share with your families. You would go to our website, creatingafamily.org, hover over the word adoption, then click on adoption topics. Later, I'll take you there and show you how to actually do it. But there are other sources as well. There's Adoptive Family Magazine, keeping in mind that that's behind a paywall, so you have to decide whether you want them to subscribe. Adoption.com is another source. And there are others out there as well. I would caution you to make certain that any resources you choose are expert-based and are trauma-informed, and not all of them are. Right. So how do you document how many hours of credit? So you've got an X number of hours required by the regulations. So how do you credit things that aren't automatically credited? You don't have a certificate of completion telling you the number of hours, and books and articles would be examples. This is just an example of how some agencies are doing it. And you could see that it's based on length. And so the length of the article is how they're doing it. You're going to hear this a lot. IAAME is focusing on documentation. So what you need to make certain of is that you've got documentation in your file that will cover this. If a family is assigned, some of the ways that books and articles are being handled, if a family is assigned a book, let's say. Some agencies ask that they write a book report or write a report on what they learned. Others require something like, tell us 5 things that you learned new from reading this article or this book. Have the families sign it, date it, and you would then have a record of it. Another way that agencies are complying with the parent training requirements is by requiring them to join online support groups. Creating a Family has one. You can see it here at facebook.com/groups/creating a family. It's been it's been on for a long time. There are also other groups, other Facebook groups. There are some connected parenting groups online. There's a lot of groups. I'm going to give you a word of caution. Be selective on what type of groups you recommend, however, because some of the Facebook groups, and I've been running one for a long time, take the educate by blunt force approach, and others seem to take the rainbows and unicorns approach. And neither one, in my opinion, is particularly effective. I think there needs to be a middle ground. So you might suggest a couple and see which one fits the style of the family and what they're looking for. All right, now I said I would separate out 96.48B 6 and 8, and that's because these are specific to your agency, so you're going to have to train specific to that. Some of the ways that agencies are doing that training is either through online or in-person meetings or telephone calls, including the information on their website, or giving the information in packets to families, actually physically printing it off and giving it to them. And there's some agencies that are doing all three. So there are any number of ways you can do it, but you do need to do this one kind of on your own. So, let me go back because when I'm talking about 96.48B8, that's talking about one of the things they talk about there is post-adoption reports. We all know how important post-adoption reports are for the countries, for the existence of continuation of international adoption, for agencies, for everybody. So we know it's important, and so we ask agencies how they were approaching trying to get it. And some agencies are just really stressing to families that you do the reporting for the children left behind, because if international adoption stops, it's those kids, the kids that were sitting right and sleeping right next to your child, who are going to be left behind. And I know of another agency that tells families in writing that a failure to follow through with any of the post-adoption reporting can result in a well-checked through Child Protective Services at their expense. I don't know if they're following through with that, but that would be a wake-up call for sure. So when is the post-adoption training being required? Well, I know some agencies require all of their training pre-home study, so before they begin the home study. There are others who do it as part of the home study process. An example of that would be to say to a family, read this article and take these 2 courses. And, because in our next meeting, we're going to be talking about transracial and prenatal exposure. So we want you to take a course on both of those. And they utilize the meeting, the in-person discussion with the social worker to not educate on the basics, but to go deeper, to understand, to answer questions, to see where there may be misunderstandings, and to help the families apply the education to their specific situation. So it's from an adult learning standpoint, it's considered the next step. And I think you might see better results. I think that that's a better use perhaps of your social worker's time. I have heard of some agencies that are holding some of the 10 hours back so as they can then include some of that for the child specific. But honestly, I don't know. I don't think that would comply with the regulations, because the home study has to summarize the training, and it should be summarizing the 10 hours of training. Um, I want to talk now about how you are making sure that both parents are getting trained. And let's be honest, we all know that I'm talking about making sure the dads are getting trained. So this is your next poll. How do you make sure that both agencies, you seem to be approaching it one of 2 ways. Some agencies let their parents take the course or the resource or whatever, the book together, and they are then issued one certificate of completion for the family. And then some agencies require that each parent submits their own certificate of completion. And so that's the poll that's up now. If you will please take your vote. Does your agency, which one does your agency follow? Which approach does your agency follow? And while you're doing that, I'll take this opportunity to grab some water. Okay, the results are in. 60% of the agencies allow the family to submit just one certificate of completion between them, but encourage the parents to both take the training. 40% require each parent in the couple to submit their own certificate of completion. The bottom line is that we really do need to get our dads trained. All right. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, now we're moving on to the first part of child specific. That's 96.48C, and that is to prepare the prospective adoptive parents with training that allows them to be fully prepared as possible for the adoption of a particular child. And that ties also in with 8 CFR 204.311 and 311, and that is the requirement that says the home study has to summarize not only the pre-placement preparation, but also the plans for future preparation and training that you're going to do with this family to help them be prepared for this particular child. IAAME is absolutely focusing on child-specific training. It is a major focus of them. It's also your biggest liability risk for wrongful adoption suits. This is where you can get burned. And keep in mind that the specific topics under 96.48C are not limiting. You can go and should go beyond those specific things. Obviously, you have to include those. And keep in mind also that when we speak of child specific, we are talking about 96.48C and E. And we'll go down talking about that more. All right, counseling. Counseling should involve some type of meeting. But now we're going to do a poll to see if you have heard of issues being with the cat. We're going to actually do two. One, we want to know if telephone calls are being allowed or accepted as part of counseling. And this is for the agencies that have gone through the accrediting process. So if you've gone through the accrediting process, please vote. If you haven't, don't on this one. We want to know whether telephone calls are being accepted as part of counseling. Okay, 56% found out that yes, they were. 44% said no. I'd like to know now, I'm going to put up another poll. Again, this is for those who have gone through the accreditation, to find out whether regular phone calls were accepted or whether it was required to be a video call. So let's go through this. Let me give it a moment. Okay, regular telephone calls were accepted. I personally think that, hang on a second, I'm trying to finding my cursor gets lost here. I personally think that if you have the option, video calls are better. I think any hesitancy for doing a video call is long gone now. I think we're all getting pretty used to them. I think so that's probably a good thing. But I also think that when you're counseling someone, you get more out of it when you can see their body language and see their responses. So I would encourage you, if you're not using video, to consider moving into using video. Again, you're going to get tired of hearing this. Documentation is crucial. And one of the ways that agencies are providing documentation for child specific is through having parents sign a form, have the regulatory language, and then parents have to initial that they receive training on that. Another form that some agencies are using is to provide a checklist for their social workers, and the checklist has a list, obviously, of topics that the social worker can check off when they have done them, and then initial and then ultimately date it. The next section is 96.48C1. And C1 is a section that talks about the child's history and cultural, racial, religious, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. There are various ways that agencies are meeting this. One, there are online courses, Creating a Family. The only ones are primarily for China. Creating a Family has one. Others have one as well, although I do believe Adoption Learning Partners has one for Korea. Some agencies are having sections on their website that are uh, country specific, and they include information on the history, culture, racial, religious, ethnic backgrounds. Some agencies have created a PowerPoint for families to look at, and some agencies go further and have a quiz that after the PowerPoint that the families have to take, which would provide documentation for their file. I know of another agency that requires a signature, just saying that a statement from the family signed and dated that they watched the PowerPoint, so that gives them documentation for this training. Um, some of the ways online you can get some of this information, and you can see that on the left, and that is the CIA World Fact Book. In the handout tomorrow, you may already have it, but we'll include the link to the CIA World Fact Book, and that's the handout. It's going to be sent either tomorrow or Friday via email. Some agencies have their families do their own research on these aspects of the country they're adopting from and then share it. And some agencies are requiring parents to write a narrative of how they're going to help their adopted child, maintain his or her connection to these issues. The known health risk in the specific region or country your child is where your child resides. I know of one agency that got dinged on the fact that they had just a single sentence saying that children in X country are subject to the following diseases. IAAME wanted more detail. They corrected it by giving more detail and including links to the specific diseases, and so that so that families can look it up. Some agencies include this information on their country sections of their website. Some of the places that it's also given to the families in writing, so that they're giving it to them more than once and they're documenting that. Some of the sources for this information online would include the WHO and the CIA World Fact Book. Again, we'll include links to both of those on the handout that we email to you. I will say that you have to dig on these sites to get some of the information. It's not just, it doesn't just jump out at you, but that's certainly a possibility of where you can get some of the information and send your families. I know of an agency that has parents do their own research on this, but I question, because it seems to me that, and then report back to the social worker, but it seems to me the social worker is going to have to know that information, because how would he or she know that what they're saying is accurate? So I'm not, for me personally, I don't think that that's as an effective way. If a family says, oh yeah, that smallpox is a problem, and the social worker goes, I really think smallpox has been eradicated. I don't think it is a problem. But then they have to both look it up. All right, now we're moving on to 96.48 C3, and that is any other medical, social, background, birth history, educational data, developmental history, or other data known about the particular child. Clearly, IAAME is focusing on this section a lot, and this ties in directly with section 96.48E, and that's the section that requires individualized counseling and preparation as needed to meet the needs in light of the particular child to be adopted, his or her special needs, and any other training or counseling needed in light of the child's background or the home study, meaning the family. So this is both child and family specific training. So we're now going to talk about how agencies are meeting the requirements of child-specific as outlined in 96.48C3 and 96.48E. Child-specific courses can be utilized. Creating a Family has a large number of child-specific courses. And we can cover things such as adopting older children, disrupting birth order, combining kids by birth and adoption, challenging behaviors, attachment issues, a possibility of sexual abuse, single parents, adopting siblings, kinship adoptions. All of these are ways for you to customize the training to fit the child and the family. We've got food issues, you name it, we cover a lot of them. In fact, let me take you and show you a mechanism that we have created for our, here we go. for our partner agencies, and if you are one of our partner agencies, we were rolling this out now. Let me pull this back up. This is child specific. I'm going to start actually with the other one. This is for the form for you to fill out with your families and your social worker. It is a fillable PDF form. It's got a place for you to, of course, put the family and the child and any other identifying information. And then we walk you through the regulations, the material that can be used that we have that you can utilize to comply with it. We have a section to make certain that your social worker has checked to make sure you've got the certificates of completion in the file, because as we said, IAAME is looking for those. And then signature boxes and date boxes for your social worker and for both parents, or one parent if not married. And you could see that we take you through all the sections of 96.48B, and then we come down to 96 point, and when there are things that it's agency specific, it's a fillable box where you can click in here and put down where if you've included more than one place, you can put all the places you've shared the information with them there. And then we come down to 96.48C, and we break it down for a summary for you to include the summary of the information, as well as to include when and where the document's name and when you gave the document with all the details of information. And to make certain that you've covered everything, we've broken it down by each section. 96.48C1 would have a section for culture, race, a section for religion, ethnicity, language. And then under health risks, we've got that covered. And each one of these can be signed, has a signature box and a date box for your parents and for your social worker. So you've got one place where everything is included that you can then utilize. Okay, this is our child, we're calling it our IEP. It's a child-specific parent training. Again, you can, this is to be downloaded and filled out by your social worker and then signed. So it's going to be specific to a family, so you can fill out both the family and the child. And then we list the special need on the first column. The second column are courses we have that will help educate your family, train your family on this special need. Again, it's fillable. Then you can click whether the certificate of completion is a file, and then you have the signature boxes for a date box, signature boxes for parents, both parents if married, and the social worker. And we've got attachment, prenatal exposure, challenging behaviors, transracial, sexual abuse, neglect, trauma, disrupting birth order, combining children by birth and adoption, food issues, LGBTQ, adopting a child with LGBTQ not issues in that community, just general special needs, including one that we just added on adopting a child with Down syndrome. Yeah, kinship adoptions, sibling adoption, things like that. And that is, again, I mentioned that for our partners, that's it's available now, but we'll be sharing it with you. All right. Now we're back to, you should be seeing the PowerPoint again. All right, so we have the child-specific courses. We have our IEP plan. I also know, oops, that's an example of just what I showed you. There are some agencies that require families to prepay for counseling, one counseling session to happen within the first month home, feeling that then there wouldn't be any excuse for not doing it. Again, the social worker checklist that I mentioned. And there's other ways that families are complying with 96.48C and E. We're having your referral reviewed by a doctor, international adoption doctor, consulting with a medical specialist specific to the special need that the child is having, that the child they're adopting has. Contacting and also consulting with a therapist and having families check and find out what therapists are available that are within their insurance network, and if not, make note of the cost associated with that. Finding out contacts for public intervention services, contacting schools that the child may attend and talking to them about what services, tutorials, and what things that they would have for a child with the special needs. Now, agencies seem to be approaching these type of requirements in two different ways. Some agencies are requiring families to show proof that they have done this. Others agencies are just encouraging. That leads us to our next poll. I would love to hear from you if your agency encourages families to do this or requires families to do this and submit proof for your file. And I'm going to read the results. Okay, 46% require and 54% encourage families to do this, to partake of these type of compliance measures, preparation measures. All right. Some other methods that agencies are using to comply with 96.48 C and E, and again, those are our child specific. Oops, went a little too fast there. Doing independent research on the special need, providing articles for the families to read, requiring, gracious, going a little too quick there, providing families with a list of blogs for families who have already adopted a child with that need, encouraging or requiring families to make contact, talk with another family who has adopted a child with that need. Identifying tutorial services, and again, finding out cost if there is a cost. Identifying state post-adoption services and making certain that they're available for families who have adopted internationally, and if not, finding out the cost associated with that. And the same with finding respite care. Is it available from the state for families who've adopted internationally? And if not, finding out the cost associated with it. Now, how to handle countries. Now, we're talking about child specific, and that's supposed to happen before travel. But best laid plans and all that, and we're talking about you, Ukraine. What happens if this information is not provided until the family is in country? So how do you meet that? Well, one, you can do preparation beforehand because you can anticipate. You know about the age of the child that may be referred. You know situations specific to the family. So you can do certain amount of training. Adopting older children, you can train on adopting issues to expect from institutionalized, how to help heal from trauma, abuse, and neglect, things like that. If they're considering adopting out of birth order, they have a young child and you think that their child they'll bring in is going to be older, providing training in that, or if they're interested in a sibling group. So all of that can be done ahead of time. But one of the things that may happen is the information is going to be presented to the family, not to the agency. So, but the agency still has an obligation to counsel and train on these issues. So you're going to have to make certain that the agency provides you with the information they got, and then you can provide the training. Sometimes they then require child-specific training. That's the obvious one. Provide child-specific training in country, have them take courses, have them read material, do stuff like that. The counseling can be done by phone, and keeping in mind too that the agency still has an obligation to look for additional information, to make certain the information is complete as possible. The bottom line, and I know you're getting sick of hearing it and sick of seeing the clip art, but the bottom line is documentation is everything. So when to do the child-specific training? Well, you need to have a child referred before you do it. So it does need to be post-referral when other than the countries where that's not an option. So one of the questions I have is how you handle the delay between when you finished your training and the family is getting ready to travel. We know of an agency that received a notice because there was more than 6 months had elapsed between the training and when the family traveled. So the next poll is up now. Is talking about how you refresh education, or do you require refreshed education for your families? And while we are waiting on that, it's finished now. Only 13% require any type of refreshment education for their families if more than 6 months has elapsed. 87 do not. And I think this is, number one, I think this is a great take-home message, is that that is a potential source for for you getting a deficiency there, an issue for correction, for number one. Number two, it's a missed opportunity in the in the adult education world. There is a term that says it's called educable moment, and people learn best when they are ripe for the education. And there is no better educable moment than when you're sitting on an airplane flying across the ocean to pick up a child, and your whole life is going to change. And so that is a great time. And what some of the agencies are doing, they're having families download uh, if they're using our courses, all of our courses can be downloaded and they can be listened to on the airplane. I know of some that they pick 3 courses that their parents have already had, but have them take it again, because that they, again, both to refresh them, but also because they will hear it differently, because they're ripe for the education. And they can also have access to them, and they'll be fresh in their minds when they're sitting in a hotel room with their child, and their child is doing things that you and I both know they were educated about to expect, but they're not remembering, and this is a good way. So I strongly encourage you to reassess how you're doing that, so that, number one, there isn't the lag, but number two, you're better preparing parents. Another thing you can do is provide articles for families to read. It is important to keep in mind that they may not have Wi-Fi either on the plane or once landed, so you may want to print them off. And an example of some of those articles might be on transitioning home. And in the handout we send you this week, I will include some links to some articles, free articles that we've got on transitioning home. And those would be great articles to include, because it talks about a lot of the things to expect, what to react to, what not to react to, things such as that. So that will be coming this week. All right, so who pays for child-specific training? Another poll is coming up. And this is not just child-specific, this is training in general. I'd like to know if you require your agencies to pay separately for their training, or is it included in your agency fee, or somehow in fees that are paid to you? Let me drink some water while we are waiting for that to come up. Okay. In answer to, do you require your families to pay for training separately? 83% answered yes, and 17% answered no. So it looks like the majority, at least of those on here, of our 100 some odd participants, are not requiring, or do require their families to pay separately. Let me just mention that if you require your families to pay separately, make certain that that is included in their fee structure. As for full transparency, you want to make certain that it is it's in the fee arrangement, that it's clear. All right, now moving to 96.48 F, G, and H. Let's see, this is FF is the providing the parents with print, internet, and other resources that are available. Some of the ways families are complying with that is to provide a list of articles on websites. They can either provide the list by just sending the link to the articles. Sometimes they print off a PDF and send to them via email, whatever. I'll show you how to find some on our site, but I mentioned other resources as well. Another thing that agencies can provide is a directory of international adoption pediatric specialists. Again, creating a family has resources, has links to that and resources on that. I will include that in the handout we send to you. How to find an adoption competent therapist. Again, we have articles on that and resources on that. All of these are free for you to use, and we will send that to you tomorrow. and also what to do. At some point, we must talk with our families about the whose responsibility is what if, in fact, in the unlikely event, the family decides that this adoption, they cannot go forward, they're going to dissolve the adoption. Information needs to be provided on that in multiple places, but just as well, and it's equally as important to discuss this with your families and not just provide the information. All right, so the next section is 96.48G, and that's whether or not you exempt prospective adoptive parents, and usually it's returning parents. So we're coming to our next poll to find out some agencies do exempt returning families, and some agencies do not, because they want to make certain that the family is, number one, trained, number two, remembers their training, and number three, they need and want proof of the training in their records. So they do not exempt families for those reasons. Let me wait for the, all right, results are in. 69% of the agencies exempt returning families from some of the training. 31% do not. And the ones that do not are likely do not because they are, for the three reasons I mentioned. All right. Now we're going to 96.4H. And that is what we've been talking a lot about. That is records, keeping records of all of this training. You're sick of it, I know, but I'm going to say it again. Documentation is key. IAAME focuses on the documentation in your records to show proof. Also, you may need proof in the future to be able to say, no, actually, we did train the family on this issue that they're experiencing. All right, but, oh, wait. This is, do not take there's a quiz. There's one that just popped up, a poll. Don't take it yet. Oops. Don't take this poll yet. Let me get rid of it. That wasn't meant to pep. That happened a little quicker than I meant. Okay, so let's talk about certificates of completion. We're talking about documentation as required under 96.48H. The things you need to make certain of that are in your certificates of completion to prove documentation of proof of training. One, obviously the name of the parent. Two, the name of the expert, if it is an expert-based course, which, not all are, but if all of Creating a Families are. So anyway, make sure you include the name of the expert. Course objectives, or what is covered in the course. And IAAME is wanting the regulatory section that the course aligns with to be included on the certificate of completion. All of Creating a Family certificates of completion do that now. In the past, until we knew that IAAME was finding violations for not doing that, we didn't. It was clear because we included it on the description of the course, but nonetheless, I would add also, and then date, of course. Let me add that if the regulatory section is not included in your certificates of completion, it is a whole lot easier to do it right then and there when your family submits it. Just handwrite it on the certificate of completion. If it's a digital one, I'm not sure how you might do it. Somehow you need to get it on there, because it's a lot easier to do it right then and there than when you're getting prepped for a site visit from IAAME. All right. Another way, here's an example of the certificates of completion from Creating a Family. This is for the course Health, Emotional, Developmental Issues Common to Children Adopted Internationally. The expert on this course was Dr. Dana Johnson. You can see down where this course aligns with a lot. It was intended to walk through the regulations, so it's covering everything. And then the date at the bottom. Here is another course. This is on helping children heal from sexual abuse. The name of the person is at the top, and this is Cressa McGowan, was education director. She took this, she gave this for us. The expert on this one was Dr. Jennifer Shaw. The course objectives are listed. The course this particular course aligns with 96.38B7 and 96.48B4 and 96.48C. And then at the bottom, you can see where the date is included. And this is it's included on all of ours. All right. We're talking about documentation. Other ways to do documentation is having families maintain an education training log that is signed and dated for each occurrence. Again, we've talked about the checklist with the regulatory requirements, and you saw an example of what creating a family's was, but there are others as well. I mean, you could create your own as well. Uh, if it is a webinar or in person, again, the key is to have the information in your file for attendance, an attendance log or whatever that actually shows they were there. It needs to have a date on it, needs to have the amount of time that the webinar or in-person training lasted. Include whether it was in person or online. And then again, you've got to include some information on what was covered for the content. For books and articles, we've talked about that. Some agencies require writing a book report. Others, I know of others who have created a quiz based on the books they recommend. They recommend specific books, and then they've created a quiz that families have to take. That then is included. And then we've got online forms, and there are a host of free resources as well as not free resources. Oops, let me go back. I'm going to show you an example of a form that was used by one agency. And this is, you should be seeing it. Thank you, Hopscotch, for allowing us to use it. They use jotform.com. There, as I mentioned, are other online services, including Google Docs, which is free, that you can create your own. Creating a Family has a similar one, but this is, I'm just going to show you theirs. They not only say the specific regulatory section, but then they list where the information was provided. In this case, it was provided through an online course, it was provided through their travel guide, it was provided through a discussion with the child-specific traveling section. So when they click yes, then they're taken to the next one, and it walks them through every single one of the requirements. Let me go back. Okay. So that's how you, and I keep skipping ahead. We're finally getting to this. One last point is that documentation is fine until all of a sudden it disappears, and then you are up the creek. So it is crucial that you document. So our next poll, and you'll be happy to hear our last poll, is on whether you back up either your digital and your paper. Do you have a backup system for backing up your documentation? 89% said yes, 4% said no. Those 4% now have a task that they know they need to do. Documentation is really important. I'm not documentation is really important, yes, but having proof of your documentation is equally important, and having a backup of that is crucial. All right, now I'm going to take you, get rid of this, to, all right, I'm going to show you, I've told you I would show you places where you can find resources on our site that are free. Okay, so let me take you to creatingafamily.org. Hover over the word adoption, or you can just click on adoption either way, and click on adoption topics. This takes you to our A to Z resource guide. And as I scroll down, we have extensive resources in many different formats and many different media on each of these topics, including extensive post-adoption. I'm just going to open one of these. I'll open transracial to show you. This is a standard resource page. We have answer common questions at the top. Then we list our most popular resources with links, of course. But if you scroll down, you will see that we have audio resources on this topic. We have articles on this topic, and we have fact sheets and tip sheets on this topic. I'm going to I'll click on the fact sheets and tip sheets, and this shows you just some tip sheets that we would have that you can, these are all free for you to utilize with your families. And on every one of the topics we mentioned, we have lots and lots and lots of resources. So something that you can access for your families. All right, now let's go to our online courses. I will take you to, we are now, you can reach it from our site, but we also, the URL is adoption, our education platform, adoptioned.org. And I have to keep moving my thing to be able to see. I'm going to take you first to the adoptive parent training. This shows you where our packages are, and there's our Hague package. If you scroll down, then you go through our featured courses, which are often our newer courses. Courses, we're always adding courses, so that just shows you, and some of our more popular ones. So that's our featured courses. But then if you scroll down, you will see that you can browse by topic, and this is where you can find the child-specific courses. We have well over 60 courses that you can access to provide child and family-specific training to comply with 96.48 C and E. So just an example, let's say, for instance, you're concerned that this child has been institutionalized and you want to, one of the special needs may be attachment issues, you don't know, but you want the family to be prepared. You can, these are some additional courses you can find, and I will scroll slowly through and you can see these are courses we have. We are really fortunate to have one of the courses, Dr. Karen Purvis did one of our courses for us way back in the day. It's beyond the length. We have a commitment that we don't keep courses for very long. After X number of years, they have to be rotated out, except for Dr. Purvis's course. And that one's going to stay. So anyway, that shows you an example. Let me, of how you would find child specific. Let me take you, because I'm going to move to staff training shortly. So let me take you to our show you, no, before I do that, hang on, I'll come back to that. Let me take you to and show you, this is, we have the ability for our partner agencies and for our referring agencies, the agencies that refer our courses, to create a branded agency specific landing page. The URL is specific to just your agency. It's got your logo on it. This is for our partners. The coupon code, because they have free access, partners have free access to all of our courses. The coupon code is listed right here. The Hague parent training form is right here, and the IEP, the child specific IEP is here, and then you can download it and it's fillable. So your families, I'm not sorry, your families, your social workers would download it from there. And then if you have created packages specific that you want your families to take, that's there. And if you've got child-specific courses that you have picked out from us that you want your families to have, that can be included. So it's all on one page that's specific for your agency. Now let me go back to social worker training, because we're moving into staff training, and then will save us time if I show you now. This is our continuing education courses, and these courses have been accredited for continuing education credit. And I'll scroll down, and we're in the process of updating these courses, all of them. And here is our Hague staff training package. I'm going to open that and just show that to you because I'm going to be referring to it here in a minute. These are the courses. And some of these will be complying with 96.38 A and B. And now we'll pop over to the PowerPoint and move into talking about staff training. So staff training is 96.38 A, B, C, and D. This has been a big focus for IAAME, and keep in mind your staff will be interviewed about their training, and you won't know in advance what staff will be interviewed. It is, again, it's a big focus. I think it's important to note who needs to be trained. Under 96.38A, the language is employees who have adoption-related responsibility involving the application of clinical skills and judgments. And by way of example, home studies, child background studies, counseling services, parent preparation, post-placement, and other similar services. IAAME is interpreting this broadly, perhaps more broadly than you would think. We know of an agency that got a corrective action on this, and they were interpreting it from a social work standpoint they were focusing on the application of clinical skills and judgment. after they got dinged on it, they then went back and are now training. They've decided that it's just easier to train most of their staff on this stuff because they didn't necessarily agree with IAAME's interpretation of who needed to be trained, so it was just easier to do that. And some agencies are obviously training new staff coming on, but other agencies are telling us that they're going to be training all of their staff just so that they know that the staff has been trained and that they have a good record of the training. And in particular, what they were finding when they were getting prepped for their site visit, when they went back, they didn't have documentation in the file of the training. So it might be easier just to train in general on this. Um, Let's see. We have seen corrective actions coming in for lack of training. If the training doesn't involve, and in specific, this is an interesting, how do you show content for the training if it doesn't involve a certificate of completion? I mentioned that your certificates of completion should have information on the content. And if you're taking a course, you should be able to find out a fairly detailed outline of what's been covered. So that's covered. But what if you're doing training for your staff? Or what if you're doing training by having your staff attend conferences and things such as that? How do you prove the content? If you conduct the training yourself, not a problem, because you should keep a record of the content of what an outline or something that shows what you covered. But if you didn't, then what would be included? It turns out that training certificates enough are not. Conference attendance, even proof of conference attendance. The title of the workshop you attended at the conference is not enough. A blurb in the agenda is not enough. So getting proof of content has turned out to be a bit of a problem for those who are attending conferences and are relying on that for their staff training. IAAME has been talking with some agencies about the need for continual staff training, and we know of at least one agency that got a high five because they required 20 hours of training for their staff every year, and that was something that IAAME liked. Keep in mind that CE is not required for this training, so your staff can take the same training you're having your parents do. So it's not required that, and if you were like using our training, you could go back and utilize the adoptive parent training. You don't have to have, unless they need the CE credits. You don't have to do that. Now, we're going to talk about specific 96.38, 1, 2, and 5, and I separate those out because it is possible to find online trainings with certificates of completion for those sections, because it's not specifically something that's identified only with your agency. Creating a Family has courses that cover all three of that. We have two courses. One covers the ethical considerations in child buying, that's A5, and the Hague Treaty laws and the INA laws is 96.38 A1 and 2. So those are, so you can find that. Now, but we go back to 3, 4, 6, and 7, and this is 96, excuse me, 96.38A, and those really they are specific to your agency, and you will need to train your own employees for that. The way that some agencies have done this is create a binder of the country laws and the state laws, and in that binder is also their policies and procedures and their information on their cultural diversity, and they give employees, they require that the employees do it. They require that the employees sign and sign something that says that they've done it so they have it for their file. And they give them time, or some of them anyway, give them time during the work hours to be able to complete this training. Some agencies do staff training in person or via video for their whole conference, for their whole agency, and then you would have record of that type of training as well. All right, now we're moving on to B, and B, 96.38B is the same, similar to 96.48, not the same, of course, because that would be too easy, but it's similar to, it's the one that specifies reasons why children need adoptive families, grief and loss, attachment, They mention post-traumatic stress, which is not mentioned in the parents, psychological issues, impact of institutionalization. It's the litany of things that have to be trained on. Um, uh, Creating a family, it's Hague package that I showed you before, does cover all of these 1 through whatever it is, 11. All right. Oh, and I just showed you the Hague training. That one does cover it. Okay. Now, let's see. I also believe Adoption Learning Partners, they have a course on medical issues. I haven't taken it, but by its title, it looks like it would cover 96.38B7. Now, 96.38C is the requirement for 30 additional hours every 2 years on current and emerging adoption practice issues. Again, keep in mind that it does not have to be CE approved, so you can use parent education to cover this. Some agencies are telling us that IAAME is looking closely at the topics for this training, and in specific, they're looking closely at current and emerging adoption practice issues, but others are telling us that they're taking a fairly broad interpretation of this. One thing to note, that trauma and loss are going to clearly be included, or should be, in my opinion, clearly included in that, and the course does not have to have the word adoption in its title. Creating a Family has a number of resources that you can utilize. I've mentioned that those are adopted CE for social workers. Those have been accredited, but we also have adopted the courses for parents that are not, and we have certainly many more of them. We also have the podcast, but my problem with that would be I'm not sure how you're going to get documentation for it, because we have no way of knowing who, how are you going to prove, and how are you going to prove if they got anything out of it. So I'm not sure that would be particularly helpful. Another couple of resources I want to share with you is, I happen to be a big fan of the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. They have some multimedia resources. Their videos are excellent. They tend to be fairly short, but they're really very good. You can view them. You can do a lunch and learn and view a couple of them. They're free, and you can get them. We'll include a link to those in the handouts tomorrow. Another free resource is the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. They have training courses. I'm going to be honest, they're pretty tedious, and I don't think they would work well for a lunch and learn. The information is good, however, they might be more for somebody if you're needing to kind of fill in. I don't know that I would do it as a group. I don't think would lend themselves well to that. The next section is 96.38D, and that is whether or not you can exempt new hires or current hires if they don't need it. Much of the same issues go in a decision to exempt as do on whether you're going to exempt parents. Some agencies exempt employees coming in if they think they know the material, some don't, and those that don't are doing it because they want to make sure that they have the information, they were trained, remember the information, and that they have proof in their files. And so we have come to the end. There's one thing I want to share that's outside of the scope of this webinar, but I wanted to share it, and that is, it's NCFA, National Council for Adoption. They have a new FSP training, relatively new, it's been out a couple of months. I wanted to share it because I think it's helpful. Well, and we really like NCFA, and we want to give them a shout out. But also, I think it's a great course from what I hear. I've not taken it, but I think it's excellent, and it certainly provides. It fills a niche for FSP, Foreign Service Provider training, and it's covering the Hague Convention, accreditation, roles of the FSP, and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and as well as applications for all of those things into the real world. So I wanted to make sure that you can find it. You can go to their website, adoptioncouncil.org/FSP training. All right, we have come to the end of our of this webinar. We're going to open it up for questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and you can see both Cecily's email and Cecily's phone number and my email if you need to reach out to us directly. All right, Jamie, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. I know that's a whole lot of information. We do have a couple of questions that have been submitted throughout the webinar, and I'll read those and give you a chance to respond. One came in and they asked, do you have thoughts on when and how to provide child-specific training for relative adoption cases, or when families come to us with their adoption already complete in country?
That's a good question. I would be, I can give you my opinion, but but it's just going to be that. I think you still have the obligation to provide, especially for kinship, I might add. We see more resistance to families receiving education because it's their kin, and they often don't perceive a need to be educated because they're adopting their kin. But even, and I would say the same for where adoptions are complete in country. At that point, it seems to be more similar to what we talked about under Ukraine. I think you still have the obligation to provide child-specific training. And at that point, you have a child and you know of the training. So the same way you would provide it for a child after a referral, you actually in some ways have more information about this child at that point. So you would then go and you can do the child-specific courses that we have a lot of them on creating a family. If it's an older child, a child who could have been sexually abused, or a child who's been institutionalized, lots and lots of courses on there, or articles, or if the child has a special need where there are support groups that are specific to that. All of that is specific training that you can do. It is, however, obviously at that point, a referral is already, that point is mute, but I think you still have the obligation to do child-specific training and document it.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Another question came in. Can you go back and just re-clarify how we get proof of training for conferences?
No, that's a great question. I've thought about it a lot because after I heard, I thought, well, that's going to be that's complex. It seems to me that if you're relying on it, you could ask the speaker, whoever the speaker is, and I certainly know when I present at conferences, I have a very extensive outline, and I would be more than happy to share it. I don't often share it, but if somebody told me that they needed it for that reason, you could do it then. You could talk to the conference, whoever is conducting the conference in advance, and say, could you give us a one-page out? Could you ask your presenters to do a one-page out? It doesn't have to be terribly detailed, but a one-page outline. Or even if they wanted to do learning objectives, I think that would count. Learning objectives, if they could say, these are the learning objectives for this workshop. I think all of that would count. It's complex, though, because it's not just enough, apparently, to have your CE. Because obviously the attendance record is what's being utilized for the CE credit. I'd love to know if others who are listening, if they want to raise their hand and share how they have done that, or if they've seen how others have done it, or if they've seen it be a problem. I'd love to hear from others if they would. I have thought about it, and I was like, gosh, this is going to be, because I present a lot, so I was thinking, gosh, I've got to make sure that I've got this, maybe a shortened version. My outlines tend to be kind of long. Nobody wants to put that in their file. So while we're waiting for somebody to raise their hand, and we'll if they have a specific experience on that, I will wait, and we'll see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, Dawn, there are a couple of others that have come in. This one is related to staff training. They say, we know that IAAME is looking at training on child trafficking. Are you going to develop a training on that?
Yes, we have a training on that. We are actually updating it literally as we speak. So yes, we will. It will be up well, not momentarily. It will be up by the end of this week, I feel certain. Well, I shouldn't say that, because we may have a few. We're trying to do it. We've got a few things we're trying to do different to make it easier for people in other countries to utilize. So give us a couple of days, or give us till next week. And we should have that up because we're replacing the one that we currently have. So yes, they are looking for that, and yes, we do have one.
Great. And also related to staff training, do you know if agencies are training their administrative assistants?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I spoke at length to an agency that I had mentioned that was very surprised because they got a corrective action because, and they looked at the correct and they said, well, this person is not applying professional skills. And their solution was that they absolutely are training their executive assistants because they concluded was that if the person has any interaction with families, they needed to be trained. So they are doing that. I can't say other than that, the experience of talking with that agency and how broadly that IAAME was interpreting it. It was, that would be the only input that I would have is from that agency. And I know for a fact they are training their executive assistants after they got their corrective action.
Okay, great, thank you. Do you have any insight into IAAME's take on a home study only agency's responsibility for child-specific training?
I don't. I did not. That was not a question we interviewed on, so it would be speculation on my part. Again, if there are people here who you can raise if you've got specific information that could answer that question, feel free to, there's a little, Jamie, where's the hand raising thing? They can raise their hand, and Jamie, it's a pain for Jamie. She has to scroll through all of you, but she can find you if your hand is raised. I'm sorry, I really don't have an answer to that, and I don't want to speculate.
Great, no problem. Another question that came in is, for staff training, can reading books and writing up a summary or key points learned be accepted?
I don't see why it couldn't, because it is accepted for parent training. So I don't see why it would not be. I do think, again, and they said writing up, I think you want them to write up something and have it dated and signed and put in their file. I can't swear that IAAME would accept that, but I don't see why they wouldn't, since I know, I am told that they're accepting it for parents. So it seems to me that would comply. And there's some great books out there.
And is 96.38A and B due yearly for staff as a refresher?
Oh, that's a good question. Hang on. I'm going to go pull those up. Well, actually, I don't need to pull it up. No, I don't think so. I think, well, I know that, let me answer that two ways. I actually don't think that it is. The A and B are the ones that are I won't be able to quickly find it for you guys. I'll scroll back and it'll take me forever to find it. Well, I tell you what I can do. Let me see if I can I'll share. I have, because I'm not proud of this, but I have a tab automatically open for the Hague regs. So anyway, so you should be able to see now. 96.38A is for new hired employees who have adoption-related experience, and then that's the ones that talk about the laws and stuff. And then B is the one that are the specific to conditions of the children, institutionalization, grief, and things like that. I don't think that is required annually. And the reason I don't think so, it says for newly hired employees. However, I do know that IAAME has been talking with agencies about the need for continual training. So I think that it would actually, there would be no reason, this would be a good thing to continually train on. And have proof of having done that, but I don't think you have to do that. I do think, quite frankly, that it's good practice. And you've got 30 hours every 2 years that you've got to train your staff on anyway. So why not include some of these topics?
Great, thank you, Dawn. And we did have one agency that's on with us that chimed in that says they do train their administrative assistants, circling back to one of the questions you answered previously.
That makes sense to me, because from talking with the one agency, if your executive has any contact with parents, and even if they don't, it's a pretty broad interpretation.
And I'm going to pull, we still have a couple of questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to pull one final question to see if you have an answer to this one. She says, sometimes home study agencies are asked to sign an exempt agreement that states they will provide the child-specific training. Did this come up at all in your interview with agencies? And the same goes for country-specific training. This is more rare, but does happen on occasion.
I do not have an answer to that. It seems unusual to me. It seems like well, of course, home study only agencies can utilize any of our resources, either the free ones or our courses, as well as anybody else's. So you could definitely do it, but the placing agency is going to be the one that's going to need it in their files, it seems to me. But I'm speculating now. I do not. I didn't interview agencies, and I interviewed a number, just, they're using our courses as well as the others, and I just didn't ask that specific question, and I don't want to speculate.
Great, thank you, Dawn. I know we could continue with questions, but I do want to honor everyone's time, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Cecily, do you want to end us up, or you want me to? Oh, she's muted. I will end us up. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. We will send you the information we have promised. And eventually this is going to be up on YouTube. And when it is, the whole webinar will be. And so if part of your staff was not able to attend, they will be able to access it there. It will take us a little bit of time, so we'll reach out to you. But we'll be reaching out soon with the information we promised. And then further down the line, at least 1 or 2 weeks, once up on YouTube, we'll reach out and send you the link there so you have access to it. We truly appreciate your time. Thank you.